Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It is time for the Bronx Buzz. This is where we do a BronxNet's program on different journalists, different reporters, writers, and editors. And so you can find out what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak. And then in our second segment, we usually do some artists, and we have a wonderful exhibit going on at the Bronx Historical Society by some wonderful, legendary Bronx photographers, and they have a new twist this year, as a matter of fact. Nonetheless, let's go right over to our buddy Steve Nessen, who's over there at Gotham Nist, literally WNYC, who covers traffic and transportation for them. Always nice to see you, Stephen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
So you wrote this article, which was interesting because I hadn't seen it anywhere else, that Governor Hochul wants to lower congestion pricing from the $15 that was recommended, and that's what the original plan was. But you added the little component to the headline that said the process could take years. Tell me a little bit, we'll break it down, but tell me a little bit about what the governor is hoping to do.
So you probably recall Governor Hochul paused the tolling plan to charge drivers $15 a day to enter Manhattan below 60th Street. The rationale that she gave was that, well, inflation is causing, the cost of groceries and everything to be so high. And drivers right now can't do another high tax. They can't pay more for, what they expect, which is just to drive into the city. She spoke with what she said were people in diners, especially drivers from New Jersey, who said maybe they won't come to the city if it's $15. And that spooked her. She said, Manhattan's fragile post-pandemic recovery is still, we're still not quite there yet. So she doesn't want to make one more reason for people not to come to Manhattan, not to go to Broadway or go to restaurants or anything like that. That was her rationale. That's what she said publicly. And privately...
Let me just interject with that, because I believe we had this discussion way back when there was talk that politically coming up with the election coming up, that it might hurt Democrats if they added a quote unquote new tax. And obviously New York has a very big role in the national political scene. And so she didn't want to interfere with that.
Right.
Am I out of line for bringing that up?
No, absolutely. That's some of the private discussions that we've also reported on. Most notably, Hakeem Jeffries tapping on the governor's shoulder saying, hey, we've got some close races in the Hudson Valley and on Long Island that could really, change the composition of the House. They could flip the House if they win those. And he supposedly was worried that congestion pricing is going to be one of those things that might lose Democrats.
So then now, so her coming back, she said, I'm going to come up with the funding anyway, because we still desperately need the $15 billion that was promised to the MTA and mass transit. And so now what does she say?
So she was actually at the Democratic National Convention. She did an interview with Politico and referenced how in London they started the toll, more like started at £5, which actually we did, adjusted for inflation is actually about $14. But nevertheless, she cited starting at a lower toll rate and maybe gradually increasing it. So I wanted to know, how low can she go? What would be the lowest rate, and what would be the repercussions if it went, much lower? And the number I came out with was $9. And the reason $9 would probably be the lowest she would want to go is because all the study, all the planning, all the research that went into the MTA's tolling plan studied a range from $9 as the lowest to $23 as the highest. Ultimately they settled for something in the middle.
Right.
But if it goes below $9, they might have to start doing a bit more study, a bit more analysis with the federal government to analyze the impact if you only charge $9 or less. If it's much less, they would have to do, possibly more review. And also, as we spoke about before, there's court cases in New Jersey. They're being sued by the state of New Jersey and some other politicians over the tolling plan. So if they change the tolling rate to something below $9, the judge in that case might decide, well, you've changed it so much that, what we've been discussing maybe isn't relevant anymore. I am going to ask you to go back and do
and literally start again.
maybe not start from scratch because they've done a lot of the groundwork already, but they'll have to run a different computer analysis. And also that the tolling rate they chose was balanced just right to raise $1 billion a year, which is what the state legislation called for.
Right. And that was going to be my next question. So, okay, you said $15 and then we're getting $15 billion. If it's $9, I don't want to do the one-to-one equation, but then are we getting only $9 billion for the much needed upgrades for mass transit and the MTA?
Right. So part of the deal was if you charge, say, a little bit more, like $15, the MTA was going to give a tolling credit to drivers who use one of the crossings. Remember, they were going to get $5 off if you enter the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, Queens Midtown. They were going to get that money back. So if it's a lower rate, maybe those toll rebates wouldn't be there. Or the other thing that the governor has spoken about is bringing it back to the legislature to maybe vote on and rewrite the congestion pricing law. That's something that we could be looking at come this January.
Well, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you who has to cover this stuff. The among the many issues, not only funding the MTA, was traffic in New York City and trying to ease things up. I wonder what hurts the city economically worse is to have all that traffic and people say, the hell with it, and they don't come in. Or if, the traffic moves, but you do got to pay a little more. Right?
It's absolutely one of the arguments that make for congestion pricing is the millions of dollars lost in productivity because you're just stuck in traffic, hours of your life.
About it. You had mentioned just before we went on the air, now folks should know we're recording this Tuesday. It'll ultimately air on Thursday. You said there's something going on this afternoon.
That's right. The MTA is going to be giving reporters a preview of its next 5-year capital plan. Those are the laundry list of big spending projects that they want to embark on over the next 5 years. And, as we were just talking about congestion pricing, that was supposed to fund the last capital plan. So they still have something like a $16 billion hole in the last capital plan for projects that are on pause or on hold at the moment. But if that money from congestion pricing doesn't come in, all those projects are just going to get killed. So what are they going to do for the next 5 years if they don't have that money coming in? It's a big question, but they do have a lot of stuff they want to do.
It's a big question, and I wish it was for like a kind of a side project for the city rather than the central project of upgrading our subway and bus systems, which of course, so drastically need them. Unwittingly or wittingly, you have segued to your other article that I wanted to talk about. This was an enormous dollar, and the headline is, the MTA needs up to $92 billion for transit upgrades, maintenance through 2029. So it's not even that far in the future. It is really just, the next few years. Where did we get that $92 billion figure? And that, I guess, doesn't include the $15 billion hole in the agency's capital plan. Where does that $92 billion come from?
That's right. Well, that figure was put together by the comptroller, and it's based on sort of what the MTA calls its 20-year needs assessment. So, for example, it's already sort of put out a plan for what it needs for the next 20 years. So this is looking at what are the most immediate things that need to happen. These are things like buying new subway cars. These are things like shoring up the elevated tracks, making sure that those are all in a state of good repair, making sure that the railroad itself, the physical railroad, is in good condition, and they need to spend money on that every year to maintain it. That's state of good repair work. The MTA has also indicated it does want to move forward with the second phase of the Second Avenue subway, so that could be included as well. But we're going to find out for certain this week,
even later today,
what they're going to be doing. Are they going to proceed with that, or are they going to scale that back in light of a tough financial situation?
I hate to poke fun, but I don't really hate to poke fun because I do it often enough. But, it's like you go to the store and you say, well, what does this cost and what does this cost? What am I getting for my $15 billion? and what am I getting for my $92 billion? Is that $92 billion figure out of whack from what other people might have, in other words, what legislators might have thought as they begin negotiating what the MTA should get, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's a good question. I think certainly the legislators are going to be involved because they're going to have to make some tough choices on how to fund it. Are they going to increase the internet sales tax, for example, the payroll mobility tax, which they increased, just the other 2 years ago? They are going to have to find a way to fund it. If it's $92 billion, there's no way that the state general fund and the city are going to be able to shoulder all of those costs. So they're going to have to think about, sure, what are we going to get for our money? Is this what we should be spending our money on? And the figure could range anywhere between 60 billion and 92 billion, or as much as 107 billion, really, because like you said, congestion pricing money is still hasn't been resolved yet. So that hole is lingering.
Yeah, recently there was a lot of talk about cracking down on fare beaters. I mean, this is a new thing. There can't be, I realize, that's a whole other dialogue, but that can't provide enough money to fill some of these gaps. I mean, they may make some money.
It's less than $1 billion lost from fare evasion. And that's across all things, subways, buses, as well as the toll plaza where, people cover their plates and don't pay.
You mentioned a number of things, replacing cars and many of the other things. What do you think, and we're just about out of time, what do you think the system needs most? I mean, I ride the subways, I ride the buses. I'm a New Yorker. I could think of 100 things. If you, just for example, Steve Nessen was given $2 billion and said, what are you doing first? What are you doing first with let's just say the subway system?
Well, for the subways, I would definitely say the signals. Don't skimp on the signal replacement program, because riders who take the L train or the 7 train, for example, those are the only 2 lines in the entire subway system that have modern electronic signals. Wow. All the other signals date back to, the technology that was basically there when the subways began over 100 years ago.
When mom and dad Axelbank said to Gary, okay, you can ride by yourself. That's when, and even before that. Listen, Steve, we got to run. You are just fantastic. Your writing is fantastic. And all the people at Gothamist WNYC are really doing important stuff for us, including this dialogue about our subways and buses. And so covering traffic for Gothamist and NYC. It is Steve Nessen. Say hello to all my buddies over there, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Take a short break, folks, and then when we come back, as I said, we're going to have a segment with some wonderful legacy photographs of the borough of the Bronx. Don't worry.
I remember when the Bronx did not really have a media outlet properly representing the people of the Bronx.
BronxNet provides for the community by being a community where people can be empowered to share their voices.
We are in a really great place technologically. We've got all the resources that we need to be effective.
Whether it's through cameras, storytelling, editing, we have provided those services for 30 years.
BronxNet's mission is to be a voice for the community.
To educate, to inform, and to inspire.
And you can be a part of it. We've built studios for you.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We thank Steve for joining us in our first segment. Second segment, as I promised, we have legendary Bronx photographers with us. and they've got a wonderful new exhibit. So let's say hello to my buddy Edwin Pagan, who is an original of Seis del Sur. Nice to see you, Edwin. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me as always.
Great. And now brand new, Abigail Montes. Nice to see you, Abigail. Thanks for joining us. We're going to find out who the heck you are in just a moment. Edwin, Seis del Sur, for people who don't know, why don't you explain what it is and then bring us up to date as to where you're at and what you've been doing nowadays.
Sure. Seis del Sur was formed in 2011. We actually met in 2010, but the group was formed in 2011. And we met as a result of going to a one-man show that Joe Conzo was having at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies when he was still on 67th Street. And Elba Cabrera, the late, great Elba Cabrera, came over and she said, "Hey, I want to introduce you." She introduced a lot of us. And just before we left, Joe Conzo said we should do something. And we started sort of friending each other on Facebook and sort of doing
and let's be clear, it was 6 photographers, 6 of the South Bronx. We're not
as
talking
in the
about
South
Carolina.
Bronx, correct.
And so I wasn't aware of that. So Elba is the person who put you, the 6 of you together. It wasn't like something that grew organically along.
No. At the end of the night, she brought us together when the things were spinning out. And so then what did you do? And then bring us up to date is what we're doing now. Well, we started communicating with each other on Facebook, and Joe Conzo said we should do something. David gave the group the name based on...
This is David Gonzalez, formerly of the New York Times.
Right, just retired from the New York Times to 35 years. And he came up with the name based on Rubén Blades, the musician's band, Seis del Solar.
I didn't know that.
And it stuck, it stuck. And we shopped around the concept of doing an exhibit by the 6 of us based on the photos that we had from the Bronx 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it was really strange because most of the people we went to weren't interested. They said they either had their schedules were full or that there wasn't necessarily a need for it, and that why are we rehashing history that's long gone in the mirror? We actually got that from
I had never heard that. That's startling.
Not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and so just to clarify, so these were photographs because you all had lived through the Bronx and the South Bronx in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and these were photographs that you had all, because you had all been photographers. And I recall the day that it was shown to the world for the first time over there at the Bronx Music Heritage Center, and it was spectacular. It was a moment of history, so you could finally, for those of us who may have not lived there or lived through it, see what really it looked like, what it felt like through the eyes of 6. I called David a Sabra, a native of Bronxite, and so that's what it was. Now, what are we doing now? And then, of course, you've got to introduce why Abigail, who is not one of the 6, is now a part of the group.
Well, actually, 2 corrections there.
Okay.
The second exhibit was at the Music Heritage Center.
Oh, that's
the first big one was at the Bronx Documentary Center, and Mike Camber was the only person that when we went to them, because he was a colleague of David Gonzalez at the Times, he was a war correspondent, photojournalist. We met with him, and within an hour and a half, we had picked a date within 3 months of our meeting to set up the show at the Bronx Documentary. So Mike Camber and Bronx and BDC were the first to give us our first seminal show.
Credit where credit is due. And then the second part of it is Abigail.
Is that Abigail actually, as of September 12th, is one of the 2 newest members to the collective. She is now an official member of Seis del Sur.
We don't call it Ocho del Sur.
No.
Am I the only one who suggested that? And so why we're going to talk to Abigail in a moment. Why were she, and name the second one, I don't have it in front of me, the other one who was made a member.
Carmen Mojica is the second person.
Okay. And why were they selected, given the number of photographers who are?
Well, we have been keeping an eye on them for a long time, and we're not just looking to bring in photographers who document the community. There's a checklist of things that we look at, how they treat the subject matter, how dedicated they have been to documenting the Bronx in the right light, and keeping things historically correct. Carmen Mojica, actually, Ricky Flores, who knows her for a great deal of time and actually is in some of his vintage photos, had been wanting to get her into the group from the very beginning. But Carmen at the time was living in Puerto Rico, and she didn't have access to a scanner. She just wasn't ready to really.
But now is the time. Let me get to Abigail, so we don't want to run out of time. Abigail, congratulations. You must feel great about being part of this legendary group.
I'm still pinching myself. I mean, it's a great honor to be seen as part of the collective. These are men who I hold in great regard. The work that they have done to document the South Bronx, and specifically the neighborhoods that I come from, has been an extraordinary inspiration for me, and I'm very proud.
It's amazing to be part of it. When did you first put a camera in your hand and say, I like this?
1997, the High School of Art and Design. I was 17 years old, and I thought, well, my dad has all these cameras, and I'm going to inherit them. I just knew that, and I started learning how to use them. And my dad gave me my first camera, and I've just been photographing ever since.
And inspired by our hometown, aren't you? I mean, taking the pictures of the Bronx, it's almost like. You can't take I don't want to say it this way, but you can't take a bad one because there's so much here and everything you look at is iconic. That's the way I look at the Bronx.
I agree. I could not agree with you more. The real catalyst for me, though, was getting my hands on In the South Bronx of America by Mel Rosenthal, who is someone who connects the rest of the states too. There are several members who knew him. I did not meet him except for his work, and I feel like my goal is to be his greatest student because I ate that book up. It was the first time that I had really understood, because I had lived, grown up in 1981. I was born, so there was a lot of that time period that I missed out on, and I couldn't understand why there were streets of glass and rubble. All my mother could tell me was that there was a fire. But she couldn't give me any more context.
A fire. That's interesting.
Right. Exactly. Because, they were busy raising a very young family and doing what they needed to do. And
so you learned the history in part through their photographs. And now I guess you kind of, Edwin, they bring it up to date a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, she has images too that are very contemporary. Some of the images in the show are from the 90s and 2000s, and she's also also coloring in an area of the Bronx map that she has a lot of coverage on in terms of images.
Can we look at pictures now? Let's stop talking about the pictures. All right, whose is this and what is this?
This is mine. These are two girls that were riding their bike on Hunts Point Avenue and Garrison Avenue. And I happened to capture them as I was on my way to the point where I was a teaching assistant in a program that I now co-run.
Why do you, I have a visceral reaction to it. Why do you like that photo?
Oh, because it reminds me of me.
Wow.
There's a story behind it. It reminds me of my best friend, Isabel. She and I, there's one girl who has a very determined face, another girl who has a very confident face. And those are two very real things that my best friend and I give to each other. And I was actually on my way to go see her when
you took it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's keep going. We want to see more pictures. That's beautiful. This certainly, I was like, wow, Anthony Bias.
Yeah.
Don't we remember?
Yeah, I took that in 1989. I became involved with the Bias family when they started really trying to get the word out, and nobody was really paying attention. And I sort of started helping them along with a few other people to try to get the communications out for them. And so I was writing some press releases for them and documenting. Right. And that was a day just before a rally near the home where they killed Anthony Byers. And it's one of the ones that, to me, is very succinct. So you see Iris Byers and her sister, Carol Sandoval, just holding the banner, just waiting patiently to get into the queue to march.
All right, let's keep it going. Let's see what else we got.
Oh, this is mine. These are twin cobblers on Simpson Street in a shoe repair shop that no longer exists. And these men had, come from Colombia, raised their families, and they saw me grow up as well. When I took this photo, I was 36 and 43 now, and they were in business at that point for over 35 years. And like, this place is just like a wonder, as shoe repair shops tend to be. They're like a hoarder's paradise. And, there was always so much to see and explore. And, the relationship that I had with them, I'm sad that they're gone now. But
do you shoot these in black and white, or did you then decide to put them in black and white?
So some of them, the project is specifically in black and white because I want my work to be in conversation with the work that came before me, specifically Mel's, but also, to be in conversation with the SACE, because I look at my work as a continuation of what they were doing, not only because the thing about that book was that it wasn't just the photos, but it was also the context of the time.
Yeah. And I think what each of them that we've seen communicates more than just the photograph. You can sense who they are. It brings, for me, emotionally. Anyway, we got time for one more. We're going to look at one more and then we'll conclude.
These are musicians on the corner of Simpson Street and Westchester Avenue at what used to be Double Discount, a business that was there for over 30 years before they got pushed out.
And, Edwin knows that I'm passionate about music in the Bronx, and this communicates every street corner, every neighborhood. That's what we have, and that's what we are. Listen, Abigail, Montes, thank you so much. Edwin, we'll let you conclude. Where can people see this display? I guess it's called HISTORIAS.
HISTORIAS, the stories behind the images. It's on display until January 26, 2025. At the Bronx Museum of History, which is run by the Bronx County Historical Society, who's been a great partner in this, particularly Stephen Payne. And they can also go to seisdelsul.nyc and sort of click the links there or scan the code and go directly to the work. And these have not only the contextual stories behind them, we've added also audio for people that want to just listen to it.
Listen, we do got to run. We're going to run out of time. Edwin Pagan and Abigail Montes, thank you for documenting our borough in the most beautiful, most dramatic, most important ways. Bronx art, Bronx music, that's what we're about. And we thank you, and we hope everybody will check out the exhibit at the Bronx County Historical Society. Up there, it's on Bainbridge, right? That's where we're.
That's right.
There you go. All right, we got to run. Thank you guys so much. We also thank Stephen for our first segment. And you know what we say, if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, we'll be back next week. Good night.